Oh, hi there. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that good stuff. My name's Al Kessel, and I'm a narrator. I thought I would share with you a small snippet from Camille Picott's new book in the Zommunist Invasion series. This one is book 2, Snipers. Here's a small clip from chapter 1. Chapter 1, Options. Cassie knew exactly what was going to happen. A. Mrs. Nielsen was going to die. The poison from the zombie bite on her shoulder had infiltrated her body. Her arms, neck, and face were crisscrossed with dark, infected veins. B. When Mrs. Nielsen died, she was going to turn into a homicidal killer, as evidenced by the 6 homicidal killers currently ringing the Nielsen home. When Mrs. Nielsen died, Cassie had 4 options. A. She could make a run for it, see how far she could get down the road before an infected caught her. Cassie was the antithesis of athletic, which made this the worst of her options. B. She could attempt to lock herself in the bathroom with her friends and hope to God someone would eventually show up and rescue them. This wasn't much better than option A. They might be able to survive a few weeks on water, but the Nielsen bathroom was tiny. Really tiny. Technically, it wasn't designed for more than one person at a time. Sitting on the toilet meant you were close enough to turn on the shower. If Cassie called the toilet, Amanda would call the shower. They might be able to cram Stevenson between the toilet and the wall, but he'd complain until their ears bled. C. She could attempt to barricade Mrs. Nielsen in the master bedroom. That could work if she could get her friends and Mr. Nielsen on board. The problem was, they really needed to barricade the room before she died, and Cassie knew there was no chance of anyone buying off on that. D. She could overdose on the Vicodin pills she noticed near the toaster on the kitchen counter. That was preferable to being bitten and turned into a monster, or killed by a Russian. At the moment, Cassie was vacillating between option C and D. Each had its pros and cons. She was leaning towards C, but only because she was notoriously bad at swallowing pills. Mrs. Nielsen might get to her before she had a chance to down a sufficient number of Vicodins. Unless the Nielsens had a mortar somewhere in the kitchen. Do that again, because you cracked like you were going through puberty. Unless the Nielsens had a mortar somewhere in the kitchen. In that case, Cassie could grind up the Vicodin, dump it into a glass of milk, and voila! She had a perfect recipe for avoiding her fate as a homicidal maniac. "How can you play chess at a time like this?" Stevenson demanded. Cassie surveyed poor Mrs. Nielsen. All she wanted to do was take out the trash. Word of the Russian invasion had first come over the radio 3 days ago from a radio station in Rossi. It had been a broadcast by Dal Granger, a guy who'd been best friends with Leo Cecchino, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend. Mrs. Nielsen, something of a neat freak, had restrained herself from taking out the trash for 2 whole days. Then, on day 3, she'd convinced herself it was safe to dash out to the trash cans. This was after Dal's second broadcast, which revealed Russians were turning Americans into zombies. That should have been enough to convince everyone that staying inside was the only way to go. Should have. As luck would have it, there had been a pack of zombies lurking in the trees near the house. 6 of them, to be exact, all with black veins and red eyes and gaping mouths. Mrs. Nielsen had been bitten 3 times before Mr. Nielsen came out with a shotgun and killed 2 of them. That had distracted the infected long enough for Mrs. Nielsen to get away. And now, Mrs. Nielsen was back in the house, dying and transforming into a zombie right before their eyes. Mr. Nielsen was in complete denial. "There must be something we can do," Mr. Nielsen was saying. "Maybe we should give her more Tylenol." Tylenol. Cassie had no words for this proclamation. Someone had to make the tough call. This wasn't unlike sacrificing the queen for the greater good in a chess game. It sucked big time, but there were those rare instances where it had to be done. "Amanda, I need your help." She gestured to her friend from the doorway of the room, keeping one eye on Mrs. Nielsen. She would revert to option B, barricade herself in the bathroom, if all hell broke loose before she could get her friend to safety. "Not now, Cassie," Amanda snapped. A growl rippled through the tiny space. Mrs. Nielsen sat up on the bed, narrowing bloodshot eyes in the direction of her husband and daughter. Everyone froze. Everyone except Cassie. She lunged through the doorway, grabbed Amanda by the arm, and yanked her out of the room. She pulled so hard that Amanda was off balance. She crashed into Cassie, sending them both into the hallway wall. "Door!" Cassie screamed. "Stevenson, door!" Stevenson's eyes were huge as he backed away from the open door. Damn it. He often caved under pressure. Cassie should have remembered that. She'd seen it happen enough in chess. "Mom!" Amanda screamed. Mrs. Nielsen shot across the bed. She barreled into Mr. Nielsen and latched onto him. They both crashed to the floor. Mr. Nielsen screamed as his wife bit down on his shoulder, her teeth tearing through his shirt and skin. Heart pounding, Cassie shoved Amanda aside. Option C. She still had a chance to make option C work. Unfortunately, that now meant locking Mr. Nielsen in the bedroom, which hadn't been part of the original plan. She jumped to her feet, lunged across the hallway and into the bedroom. She grabbed the door handle just as Mrs. Nielsen turned bloodshot eyes in her direction. Cassie hauled back on the door. Mrs. Nielsen leaped when she only had it halfway closed. By sheer dumb luck, Mrs. Nielsen hit the back of the door. The force of it slammed the door shut. "Mom! Dad!" Amanda rushed forward. Cassie blocked the way. "No, stay back. But it's not safe. Stevenson, grab the sideboard." Stevenson had retreated to the end of the hallway which led into the kitchen. There was a sideboard in there where Mrs. Nielsen kept all her linens. It was skinny enough to drag down the hallway, but large enough to block the door. Stevenson gaped, eyes blinking rapidly behind his glasses. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He didn't move. Cassie realized she was going to have to move it herself, but she couldn't leave Amanda here. She was likely to do something stupid like go in after her parents. Her mother was currently slamming her body against the door, growling and snarling. "Come on, Amanda." She grabbed her friend's arm with both hands and pulled. Amanda stumbled blindly after her, tears streaming down her face. Sobs broke free from her chest. It was an awful sound. Cassie blinked back her own tears. She adored the Nielsens. She'd taken countless road trips with them to various chess tournaments up and down the state, all through high school. She was at their house so often, she was practically their surrogate daughter. Cassie plowed into Stevenson and shoved him the rest of the way into the kitchen. He fell back against the sink, fumbling at the kitchen knives that sat in a wooden block on the counter. "Stevenson, help me move this." Cassie positioned herself on the far side of the sideboard. Other than to grab a rather long knife, Stevenson didn't move. "I can do it." Amanda, still choking on sobs, got the other end of the sideboard. Fear and frustration made Cassie want to scream. Amanda had just lost both parents to a Russian virus, yet she was able to pull it together. Stevenson, on the other hand, stood at the kitchen sink like a useless fish. Cassie and Amanda dragged the sideboard down the hall and positioned it in front of the door. "Amanda?" It was Mr. Nielsen. "Dad?" Amanda leaned against the wall, brushing stray wisps of brown hair out of her eyes. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" he called through the wood door. Growls from his wife punctuated his words. "Yeah, are you?" A brief silence followed this question. Poor Amanda couldn't stop crying. "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't think your mother would actually bite me." "What's she doing now?" Cassie asked. She half expected Mrs. Nielsen to eat her husband. "She's not paying any attention to me now," he said. "It's like she just needed to bite me." In yesterday's broadcast, Dal Granger had told them this was how the virus spread, through bites. All organisms had an internal directive to procreate. After what Cassie has just seen, she was pretty sure she'd just witnessed Mrs. Nielsen following the virus's need to replicate. And now that she'd done that, she was finished with her husband. Pretty soon, Mr. Nielsen would succumb to the virus. He, too, would become a virus-replicating machine, just like the monsters outside ringing the cottage. Mr. Nielsen had only a few hours. Mrs. Nielsen continued to pound and scratch at the door. Stevenson at last came back into the hallway. He carried the knife in one hand and dragged a chair in the other. He was trying. That was better than nothing. Cassie took the chair from him and wedged it beneath the sideboard. "Can you grab another one?" she asked Stevenson. He nodded numbly and headed back toward the kitchen. "Dad, what are we supposed to do?" Amanda asked. "We need to get you out of there." "No, sweetie, that's not an option." Silence again. Cassie took advantage of the moment to shove a second chair beneath the sideboard. It wasn't bad as far as barricades went, although she'd feel better if there was another mile between them and the Nielsens. Amanda and her father continued to talk through the door while Mrs. Nielsen tried to batter her way through it. Cassie retreated to the kitchen with Stevenson. "What are we going to do?" Stevenson asked in a wail of despair. Cassie didn't answer. The truth was, she hadn't given them good odds of making it this long. She hadn't plotted out their next moves yet. She went back into the living room and sat in front of the chessboard. Chess was her happy place. She could think better when she had her chessboard in front of her. "What are you doing?" Stevenson followed her into the living room. "Can you stop playing chess for 5 minutes?" Cassie resisted the urge to scream. Didn't he understand that chess was the only thing keeping her from totally losing it right now? She resumed her game, playing against herself. Black pawn advances to d4. White bishop takes black pawn. Her hands moved rapidly as she played. She wasn't thinking about the king's Indian defense anymore. She was thinking about the hard facts and listing them out in her head. A. The house was surrounded by zombies. B. There was one zombie in the house with another on its way. C. The Nielsens loved to buy things on sale. They had enough canned food and other shelf-stable things to feed Cassie, Stevenson, and Amanda for at least a month if they rationed. D. That shelf-stable food wouldn't do them a damn bit of good if they didn't figure out what to do about points A and B. E. If Stevenson didn't stop pacing and asking her how she could play chess at a time like this, she might stab him to the eye with a bishop. F. Amanda was surprisingly lucid, considering the circumstances. G. Cassie, Stevenson, and Amanda were members of the chess club. Thanks to their honor classes, they had a combined grade point average of 4.6. If they had any hope of surviving, the only thing they had on their side was smarts. Brawn was nowhere to be seen. Cassie continued to play. The thumping from the Nielsen's bedroom was seriously beginning to stress her out. It was also riling up the natives outside, who had returned to scratching and thumping on the outside of the house. "Checkmate," Cassie said at last. "What?" Stevenson stopped his complaining long enough to frown at her. "Checkmate. Black wins." Cassie set the chessboard aside and stood. "We need to find the entrance to the attic." "Wait, what?" Stevenson trailed after her into the kitchen. "We need to find the entrance to the attic." "Why?" "We're going to let the zombies inside." "Ooh, the zombies are going to come into the house." "What next?" "You're going to have to wait until this book is finished and published. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and peace out."